Hi everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why it is so tricky to switch between different ways of thinking, especially when language gets involved? Well, get ready, because today we're diving into a fascinating study about how our brains handle numbers, and it turns out our language might be playing a bigger role than you think. Imagine you're trying to write down a number you just heard. Simple enough, right? But what if the way you hear a number is totally different from how you write it down? That is exactly the puzzle researchers explored with Arabic speakers. You see, in Arabic and some other languages, when you say a number like 52, you actually say 2 and 50. Now, when you go to write that number as a digit string like 52, you are supposed to write the 5 first and then the 2. But if you just heard 2 and 50, your brain might naturally want to write the 2 before the 5 because that is the order you heard it in. This is called decade unit inversion, and it is a real challenge. So the big question researchers asked was, when this number writing gets really hard, do our everyday brain skills like focusing and juggling information step in to help? Or is it more about the specific sound processing parts of our brain? To figure this out, they first did a study just to see when this unusual writing happened. They had Arabic speakers listen to numbers and write them down. They noticed that people often wrote the digits in the order they heard them, instead of the standard left to right way. For example, for 502 and 30, they might write 5, then 2, then 3 to make 532. They called this UD writing, meaning unit digit before decade digit. The key finding here was that this UD writing happened a lot more when the number involved two separate words for the tens and the units, like 57. But when it was a single word, like 15 or 50 UD, writing was much rarer. This told them that this strange way of writing was directly tied to the effort of dealing with that inverted word order, the inversion itself. It wasn't just some random habit. Now, for the really interesting part, experiment 2. To see what kind of mental resources were being used, they used a clever trick called the dual task method. Basically, they made the participants do two things at once. The main task was still listening to numbers and writing them down, but they added a second task to try and stress out different parts of the brain. They had 3 conditions. In the first, participants just listened and wrote numbers. In the second, while listening and writing, they also had to continuously repeat a set of 3 color names. This second task was designed to put a load on their phonological system, the part of the brain that deals with sounds and speech. What they found was that when people had to do this sound-focused task along with writing the numbers, they used the UD writing strategy more often. This suggests that the sound-based part of processing the number words was important for handling that tricky inversion. Then they tried the third condition. This time, while listening and writing, participants had to quickly say random color names that came to mind. This second task was designed to tax their executive functions, the brain's control center skills like planning, focusing, and juggling multiple tasks. Here is where it got really interesting. Adding this executive load didn't make UD writing happen any more often than when they just had the sound-based task. So what does this all mean? The researchers concluded that dealing with this decade unit inversion isn't so much about our general purpose executive skills, like our working memory or our ability to control our attention. Instead, it seems to rely more on specialized phonological resources. Think of it like this. The brain has a special filing cabinet for sounds, a phonological input buffer. When you hear numbers with that tricky order, this buffer is working hard to keep the sound straight so you can figure out the number. When they overloaded just the sound processing part with the color naming task, it disrupted this buffer, making them fall back on that easier but unconventional UD writing strategy. But when they tried to mess with the control center, the executive functions, it didn't make a difference in UD writing. This suggests that while executive skills are vital for many complex tasks, this specific hurdle of number-word inversion seems to be handled by a more specialized sound processing system, not the general thinking hard part of your brain. This is super important because it tells us that our brains aren't necessarily calling on our big, powerful executive functions for every little cognitive challenge. Some tasks, even difficult ones like this number inversion, might be handled by more specialized dedicated systems. It is like having a specialized tool for a specific job rather than using your main toolbox for everything. It is also worth noting that even with the challenge, the overall error rate in writing the numbers was pretty low, showing how adaptable our brains are. But the UD writing itself was a clear sign that the brain was finding a workaround for the difficulty. What is really cool is how this study highlights the influence of language structure on cognitive processes. The fact that speakers of languages with inverted number words show these specific writing patterns and rely on certain cognitive resources really underlines how our linguistic background shapes our thinking, even in something as fundamental as handling numbers. Now, a little on the limitations. The researchers pointed out that while the phonological dual task did increase UD writing, they couldn't pinpoint exactly which phonological process was affected. Was it the sound buffer or something else? Future studies could use more targeted tasks to explore this further. Also, the executive task they used, the random word generation, is a common way to test executive functions, but there could be other ways to tax these skills that might yield different results. But overall, this research gives us a fantastic glimpse into the specialized nature of number processing. It suggests that when faced with a linguistic quirk like inverted number words, our brains don't automatically pull out the big guns of executive control. Instead, they lean on more specific phonological machinery. This could mean that our language shapes not just what we can say, but also how our brains process fundamental information like numbers. It really makes you wonder about all the other ways our native languages might be subtly shaping our cognitive architecture. So, the next time you find yourself fumbling with a number because of how it is said, remember it might be your dedicated sound processors working overtime, rather than your general brain power having a hard time. It's a reminder that the mind is incredibly intricate, with specialized systems for specialized tasks. What does this mean for us? Well, it suggests that when we're learning or performing tasks that involve these linguistic twists, focusing on the phonological aspects might be more beneficial than trying to simply focus harder using general executive strategies. It could also shed light on why some individuals might struggle more with these specific number tasks, pointing towards potential difficulties in their phonological processing systems. This research also adds to a growing body of work that is trying to untangle what executive processing really is and when it is actually needed. It is a complex area, and this study helps us see that not every difficult task necessarily taps into those overarching executive functions. Future research could explore if similar phonological dependencies exist for other linguistic oddities in number processing across different languages. It would also be interesting to see if training or interventions targeting phonological processing could help improve performance in tasks like decade unit inversion. So, what do you think about this? Does it surprise you that your language might be influencing how you write numbers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the fascinating world of cognitive science, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more awesome science breakdown, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the human mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.